Hey, remember when I told you we don't have the hard part of photosynthesis?
Yeah, we do. We remember that, yeah.
Well, I have something to tell you.
Okay.
Something bad.
Okay.
I lied!
Ah, oh no! Why did you lie to us?
Come here, little people. We haven't even talked about how a plant is adapted to photosynthesize yet, let alone all the little molecule stuff. Let's go.
So, what does a plant do with all that sugar it makes by photosynthesis? Well, some of it it's going to use in respiration. Just like us, it's going to need to release energy to stay alive as well. Now, because sugar is soluble, meaning it will dissolve in stuff like sugar dissolves into your tea, it will also dissolve into the water inside the plant. This means it can be easily transported around the plant for use in respiration by other parts of the plant. Some of the sugar made is also used to assemble small molecules into bigger ones. Some is used to make cellulose, that's the tough material that make up plant cell walls, that gives them their kind of strength and support. And some is combined with mineral ions from the soil to make amino acids, which the plant can then use to make new proteins. Now finally, and we're going to look at this in a bit more detail, some of it can be stored as starch for use at a later date. Because if you think about it, plants can only photosynthesize during the day. So what are they going to do at night? They're still going to need to respire then, yeah? Here's another look at that sugar molecule, the glucose molecule. Now, as I said earlier on, it kind of looks like a hexagon with a few bits sticking off. See? Hexagon. Don't believe me? Hexagon. So here we've got some glucose molecules just dissolved into the water of the cytoplasm of the cell. Now, this would present a problem to the plant because in addition to being readily available for respiration, you also want to store it somewhere so it can be used again. To do this, the plants use enzymes. And of course, that's where enzymes come in. Here's Mr. Enzyme. And again, the enzyme has an active site. That's the part where it'll bond onto the substrate. In this case, the substrate is glucose molecules. So here we've got the unsuspecting glucose molecules just bouncing about. Look out! It's Mr. Enzyme! The enzyme slowly moves. The enzyme will bind onto the glucose molecules. And then the enzyme will bind the glucose molecules together. And of course, like any enzyme, this enzyme is unchanged by the reaction and can be used again. And it will continue to bind glucose molecules together until you've got a long kind of chain of these molecules. I've just simplified it to 3 because I didn't want to cut out too many. But obviously in real life these long chains of glucose molecules will be much longer. And together, when you join up a whole load of these sugar molecules, you get a starch molecule. Now, starch is insoluble, meaning it does not dissolve, unlike sugar. Which is why if you look at test tubes with starch solution in them, like we used for our enzyme experiments, they're quite cloudy. And if you want to test for the presence of starch, you can use iodine, which will turn black if there's starch in solution. Okay, a quick note on naming enzymes here, because I know that'll keep you awake at night otherwise. Our enzyme that we're using here joined a whole load of monomers together to make a polymer. So, like any enzyme, it's named after the substrate and ends with A's. So in this case, it's a polymerase. I did mention that plants are very well adapted for photosynthesis. They're experts at it. They're not the only ones that can photosynthesize, but they're really, really good at it. So here's why. Firstly, they organize their chlorophyll into chloroplasts. Now, by having them in certain places, they can more efficiently use sunlight to photosynthesize. They have a root system, which will supply the leaves with water. And the leaves themselves are very well adapted for photosynthesis. And we're going to look in more detail later on, but very simply, they're very thin, which allows gas to diffuse easily in and out of them. They're very broad and wide to catch sunlight. And they've got a network of veins that will supply them with water and carry away the sugar that they produce. The leaf has a lot of very ingenious adaptations to help it photosynthesize. And here what we've got is a cross section through a leaf, like if you chopped a bit through a leaf. So on the top there, the kind of green, the green bit at the very top is the kind of cuticle on top of the leaf. If you feel some leaves, they're always quite waxy. This is kind of like a waterproof layer, just like you put wax on your car. The only difference being here, we're not trying to keep like the rain off. We're trying to keep the water inside the plant's tissue inside the leaf. The plant has got an epidermis, just like we do. It's the outside bit, the outside living bit of it, like not quite like a skin, but an outer layer. Now, where most of the photosynthesis happens is in the palisade cells. These are a type of mesophyll cell, and they've got a lot of chloroplasts in them, which will be arranged vertically to catch as much sunlight as possible. The other type of mesophyll cell is the spongy mesophyll layer, which look kind of globby and blobby. And the reason they're quite rounded and they're not really wedged in together is it leaves lots of space in between them. This will allow gases to diffuse in and out very easily. There's an epidermis on the lower part of the leaf as well. And there's a vein filled with xylem and phloem, if you remember from our tissue video, that will carry water to the leaf and will carry the sap away to the rest of the plant. Now, two very particular adaptations is the leaves underneath them have a stomata, which is basically just like a little kind of cave built into the underside of the leaf. And what this is a place where the gases can diffuse into the leaf, from which point they can diffuse to the rest of the leaf. But they're also kind of guarded by guard cells. Now, we'll come to exactly how they work in a moment, but ignore that but from the last bit. I just didn't want to record it again. Alright, so the stomata are, on the outside of the stomata, they've got these guard cells, two cells that can expand or contract to either close the gap or to open it. Now, the reason this is important is during the day you want to get gases in and out of the leaf, so you want to get carbon dioxide in for photosynthesis, and you want to get rid of the oxygen that's released. But at night time, when there's no sunlight, obviously the plant can't photosynthesize. And instead of just leaving these holes open all the time, you're going to close them off. The reason being, you don't want all the water escaping. Water will evaporate from a plant all the time. It's kind of its enemy is losing water. So by closing these guard cells and closing the stomata, it will reduce the amount of water that will evaporate. Okay, I'll give you a bit of a break for a moment. Here's a picture of Prince Charles chasing a little girl who's blowing some bubbles. And now we're back onto it. We're going to look at something a bit more serious now, limiting factors. And I'm going to start, of course, with my love of Ferrari cars. I love Ferrari cars. I've got a dozen of them. I drive the Fiesta around, you know, when Jeeves is waxing the Ferraris. But, okay, that's probably a lie. And in fact, that is a lie. I don't have a Ferrari. The main reason I don't have a Ferrari is I don't have enough money. Money is limiting my ability to buy Ferraris. It's a limiting factor in this situation. Plants also find themselves limited by certain factors. For instance, if you have a look at this graph here, on the x-axis we've got light intensity going up as you go across to the right, and on the y-axis we've got the rate or the speed of photosynthesis in completely made up units. Now, if we increase the light intensity, you'd expect the amount of photosynthesis the plant can do to go up, which, you know, it does. As you shine more light on a plant, it can photosynthesize more. Now, in ideal conditions, this would keep increasing and increasing and increasing. But of course, in real life, this doesn't happen. At first, it does look like that's happening. As the light intensity increases, the rate of photosynthesis increases as well. However, after a little while, it levels off, and no matter how much you increase the light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis won't increase anymore. So something else is limiting the rate of photosynthesis. Now, if you think about it, it's logically pretty easy to figure out. I mean, a plant needs water, carbon dioxide, and light in order to photosynthesize. So if it has all the light it needs, it must be one of the other factors that is limiting the rate of photosynthesis. If we were to do a similar graph for carbon dioxide concentration, we'd have pretty much the same thing. The rate of photosynthesis will go up very fast, up to a point, but then something else is limiting it. In this case, it could be either the amount of water available, or it could be the amount of light available. So again, one of the other factors is limiting it. In this graph, we've got the rate of photosynthesis versus temperature. And as you increase the temperature, the photosynthetic rate goes up, but after a while it stops increasing, and then in fact, if you keep increasing the temperature, the rate of photosynthesis will actually drop off. Now this is because photosynthesis is controlled by enzymes, so those enzymes will behave in a similar way to what we learned about earlier on. Quick note, chlorophyll is not an enzyme though, because it's not a protein. So we've seen how the absence of one particular factor can limit the speed of photosynthesis, just like a speed limit might limit the rate of a Ferrari car driving, unless I was behind the wheel, because if I had a Ferrari, no one would stop me. Now, if you're a farmer and you're trying to grow crops, then obviously you'd want to you'll want to maximize the amount of photosynthesis that is happening. Now you can easily do this by growing your crops inside greenhouses, or on a larger scale inside polytunnels made of a kind of polyplastic. These will allow you to control the conditions inside, so you can control how much nutrients your crops are getting, you can control how much water they get, you can reduce the amount of pests that can get at them, and also you can increase the temperature, because like I mentioned earlier on, photosynthesis is controlled by enzymes. You can warm up those enzymes to get them working better. Okay, another way to maximize photosynthesis is the use of hydroponics. This is where you can grow plants in a growth medium instead of in soil. Now that's just water with all the ions, the mineral ions that they're going to need, mixed in. The advantages of this are you don't need as much space as you do for growing conventional crops, and it will allow you to grow crops that you might not be able to grow. Alright, well done. That was another mammoth of a video. Here's a picture of a little girl about to get devoured by a dog. Probably not actually, because she looks too relaxed. Probably not going to get eaten. We can hope.